go.
The Zelda series has an interesting history when it comes to direct sequels, and it actually started as soon as the original title was receiving its first follow-up. While the first game in the Legend of Zelda series is often regarded as a true classic among its contemporaries, the second game has a more strenuous legacy. Over the years, I've always heard Zelda 2 referred to as the Black Sheep, the bad one, the Zelda game that was too different, too difficult, and worth a skip if you were trying to experience the series. You might be surprised to hear then that when the game was first released, it was actually very well received and was one of the most popular games of its time. I think a lot of that started to change once the series started to formulate a more specific identity, but we'll probably have to get more into that when we review A Link to the Past. I've seen more people in recent days coming to this game's defense, including the Completionist, who uploaded a video defending this game while I was working on this very script, so yeah, thanks Gerard, but the consensus still seems to be largely against the favor of today's subject matter. So what do people find so polarizing about this game now? What did they like about it upon its initial release, and how did this title help lay the groundwork for the franchise as we know it today? Spoilers ahead, let's find out as we take our second trip to Hyrule with Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. Something people mention pretty often about this game is just how much of a departure it was from the format of the original title, and yeah, that is true, but there also hadn't really been a real formula set in place for Zelda yet. People forget, but Zelda 2 released in Japan before we even got the first game in the West, and the team was already experimenting to see where the series could go and what best delivered the spirit that inspired Miyamoto's Hylian epic. Unlike Zelda 1, Adventure of Link didn't see a cartridge release in Japan. It was Famicom Disk System and nothing else, but it was once again sporting that nifty save feature and some higher quality sound with a new composer taking the reins for the music. Over here, on the other hand, we once again got one of those shiny gold cartridges to brag about, but interestingly enough, both this and the original title were given re-releases toward the end of the NES's lifespan in the form of these more standard gray cartridges. You'll actually see these less often than the sparkling gold counterparts. I guess all that glitters is not, well, no, these actually are gold, so no, that doesn't work. But like I mentioned before, this game did really, really well, even managing to sell 4.3 million copies. Miyamoto wanted to go into this project with a fresh take. He wanted to create something very different from its predecessor and keep things new. Was he unhappy with the original? Did he just have some crazy new ideas for the second title? Well, I'm not really sure, but something here works, because you can't really argue that this game wasn't successful. Maybe they had a little less tact in their setup, though. Anyone who knows me can tell you that one of the things I value the most in a game is the storytelling, but man, I don't know if this game wasn't putting in enough effort to get his story across, or if he was trying too hard. This manual is packed. I'm exaggerating, but seriously, there's a lot of information in this backstory section of this little booklet with a lot of characters between a brand new Princess Zelda, Link coming of age, same Link as last time, but different Zelda, bear with me here, the King of Hyrule, the Prince of Hyrule, an evil wizard that casts a sleeping spell on the young princess. What is going on here? At the heart of this story, it's really a plot about Link learning he's ready to inherit the missing piece of the Triforce of Courage, and he needs to locate it deep in the sacred palaces of Hyrule so he can awaken the princess and save the kingdom from further turmoil as Ganon's forces attempt to resurrect the old pig monster. Like, I get trying to world build a bit, but so much of what's in this backstory is so irrelevant to the actual events of the game. Like the sorcerer that casts a spell on Zelda? Yeah, who was he and where did he come from? Well, that's a good question, because he just sort of died before the game even started, but I guess his place in the setup was done. I admire the attempt, but sometimes less is more, and I never thought I would have to say that about the plot to an NES game. It's obviously not the end of the world or anything, just more on the unneeded side, I guess. Within the game itself, you just have a very simple goal. Use a set of crystals and 6 palaces to unlock the way to the Great Palace, destroy the Thunderbird, an artificial life form guarding the Triforce of Courage, collect the Golden Dorito, and wake up Zelda. You start the game at Hyrule Temple, where Zelda will lay there sleeping for the rest of the adventure. You know, I gave props to the first game for at least making some attempt to give the princess a sense of agency in the plot, fleeting though it may have been, but I guess they wanted to take a few steps back in that regard with the titular character rendered unconscious for the whole journey. And man, I'm really hoping this isn't repeated for another upcoming Zelda title. Immediately after leaving this temple, you can see where some of the changes have taken form. Link is a lot smaller on the screen, and rather than moving around between sections of the map, you have a situation here that looks a little more akin to a JRPG overworld, and trust me, me, this won't be the last time I'm making that comparison. From the outset, you're actually blocked off from being able to wander too far away, and you do have a couple of locations you can visit from here, and what the hell is that? Okay, so also like an RPG, enemies can appear in the overworld, and if you make contact with one of them, or in the more likely scenario, they make contact with you, you'll transition to a side-scrolling battle scenario. This isn't turn-based or anything though. The combat in Zelda 2 actually requires a lot from you in terms of skill and reaction time. Enemies will come at you from the side, above, and sometimes even from below, and you've really got to be on your toes when fighting these things because in this game, Ganon's forces are out for blood. Oh, and that's not a turn of phrase either. They are literally out for Link's blood here. They want to kill the kid so they can sprinkle his blood on Ganon's ashes and bring the evil pig lord back to life. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, so you really got to get good at jumping, crouching to use your shield to deflect attacks, and learning the weaknesses and patterns of enemies to slash away when they're vulnerable to take them out. Just try not to get taken out too many times yourself, because another new feature exclusive in the Zelda series to this game alone is a life counter. You can only afford to die so many times in this game, 3 to be exact, and when you've been taken out on your last life, I can't lie, I love this game over screen. It's simple and quick, but undeniably effective. The grim silhouette of your greatest foe looming in the background, accompanied with his laughter and those 3 words encapsulating the weight of your failure. Return of Ganon. It's great, and it's probably one of the most memorable things about this game, for better or for worse. You know, outside of people talking about just how different this game was from the rest of the series, I mostly hear complaints about the title's difficulty. And yeah, this game really isn't messing around. I can't even tell you how many game overs I've piled up over the course of this playthrough. Oh wait, that many. And it isn't just the fact that you have a limited amount of lives, though I guess that's a part of it. Alright, let's talk structure. Before you can venture off to the Great Palace, you need to visit the 6 smaller palaces scattered across Hyrule, but it's usually not a great idea to head straight there. All across the map, you'll find towns where Link can stock up on essentials. Each town will have an older woman that invites him inside to replenish his magic, and a younger one to refill his heart gauge. I know the obvious joke that's always circulated around this mechanic, haha, you're all very funny, but I've personally always liked to imagine it was something a bit more wholesome. These are troubled people facing a looming peril threatening their kingdom, and there's just something kind of heartwarming to me about them opening their doors to some kid that's doing his best to save them and patch him up before he continues on his journey. There, I took it too seriously and sucked up all the fun. You're welcome. Oh, but your ears did not deceive you. I did say magic back there. In these towns, Link can always find some old wise man to teach him a new spell. Oftentimes, you'll need to complete some sort of small side quest for a relative of the wise man to speak with him, like finding a lost mirror or a statue or a child that was just kidnapped by monsters. He looks very enthused about his rescue. Once you have these out of the way, you can speak with the resident geezer and learn some magic. A shield spell to raise your defense, a jump spell that helps you reach higher ledges, fire to launch projectiles, reflect to send special attacks back where they came from, fairy to, okay, and the oh so creatively titled spell known as Spell. You'll use this one like twice to reveal new locations. That's pretty much all it does. I would argue that the 2 most crucial spells are Thunder and Life. Life is the one you'll be using the most. It's the only way you'll be replenishing health while on the field, but it takes up a lot of your magic. I think the only other spell you'll be using this frequently is Shield, because that extra boost in defense can be really helpful, especially during boss encounters. Thunder, on the other hand, is a spell that will just wipe out the entire screen worth of enemies, but it's gonna take a metric crapload of your magic meter every time you cast it. That said, it's absolutely essential for finishing the game. Basically the silver arrows for Zelda 2. Let's return to that when we tackle the Great Palace. Even still, that's not all you can learn from the folks of these villages, as 2 specific towns are housing soldiers that can teach you new combat techniques that allow you to thrust your sword down below you or up in the air. The upward thrust is handy, but I find it's used to be pretty circumstantial. Glad to have it, but the utility is limited. At the downward thrust though, that's a different story. You basically need this move. I can't tell you how much I use this to jump over enemies while defending myself, reaching small and tight locations, avoiding otherwise lethal death traps. The sooner you can add this to your arsenal, the better, because you'll need everything you can get when you start going into palaces and begin dealing with stronger opponents. Once you start moving through these places, you'll need to memorize which hallways lead where, and a good amount of the time you'll be finding keys that unlock doors barring your way forward. Enemies can hit a bit harder here than they will in the overworld too, but you may notice that defeating enemies will often grant you with experience points. This is where things get really RPG. E. As you gain points and level up, you can choose to allocate these points towards increasing certain stats, either your health, magic consumption, or strength. This is where those fights in the overworld can really pay off, but to my surprise, a lot of this is paced rather well. Like, I didn't really find myself in many places where I needed to grind, especially since some of the stronger enemies and palaces can drop a pretty hefty amount of XP when you take them down. That said, there are some palaces that have these statues just sort of hanging out front, and if you hit them with your sword, you can either get a red potion that instantly refills your magic meter, or a red dark nut that'll pop out looking for a fight. Well, the red potions can help you heal up with magic if you need it, and the dark nuts drop some really good experience, and if you leave the area and pop right back in, the statue resets, so if you really want to grind a level or two before heading into a palace, this is the best way to do it. The palaces themselves can range in difficulty. Obviously, the first couple aren't going to be too bad, but as you go forward, they become increasingly complex, and unless you've got a really good memory, and if you aren't using a map, you're going to be seeing yourself running through these places over and over, combing over each area trying to grab keys, not fall into bottomless pits or invisible floors or lava, just doing anything you can to collect a special item in each temple, make it to the boss, and try not to die. Or even just pray that some of these enemies actually will die. Come on, man, just die already. You're like the strongest thing I've ever fought. How are you actually taking this many hits? Just die! Or you could just kill them easily with the downward thrust. And if you manage to make it to the bosses, you still can't let your guard down. You really gotta learn their patterns quick and adapt. Hit them when they're open and try not to take too much damage yourself, or... And there it is. Lose all of your lives in the middle of a palace and your tunic-wearing butt is going straight back to Hyrule Temple. Why does every enemy in this game have to hit so hard? Why aren't there any continues? Why does every mechanic have to be so unforgiving, and why do I like it so much? Despite my complaints, yeah, I enjoy this game a lot, and a part of that actually comes from the way this version of Hyrule is handled. Yes, you have to start back at Hyrule Temple every time you lose all your lives, but I think this overworld is actually structured pretty well around this mechanic. As you explore palaces, you can obtain important items that will help you navigate the map, like a candle that will illuminate dark tunnels, a hammer that will let you destroy boulders, a raft to travel across stretches of water, and Hyrule Temple is actually placed in such a way that it stays pretty centered among the important locations you need to travel across. Yes, you have to trek through these areas you've already been in. Yes, you are inconvenienced by this design, but by virtue of this consequence to your failure, the more you collect by conquering palaces, the less the overworld can inconvenience you. And trekking back through these shortcuts is a pretty good way to showcase just how far you've come and how your ability to traverse through this treacherous land has evolved. Exploring the map is rewarding in and of itself too. Just like in the first game, collecting these palace items will often open up the way to new caves and secrets that can lead you to permanent upgrades to your maximum health and magic, or sometimes you'll stumble across bags full of experience points to help you level up, making you more formidable and rewarding you for going out of your way. You can also find these link dolls, which act as 1-ups, but these are not permanent upgrades to your life counter. Once they're gone, your max is still 3 alive, so you're gonna want to hang on to these for later. I know this version of Hyrule. I learned what's hiding away in its caves. I know the people that live here. The citizens respond to Link warmly, doing what they can to help this young man on his quest. I love the idea of Link learning new combat techniques from seasoned guards who have no doubt fought through countless battles, passing on their knowledge to a hero of a new generation. The old wizards entrusting magic of wondrous power to a mere boy on a quest to save their kingdom. Concerned citizens going out of their way to heal the wounds of this battle-worn adventurer. People sharing any knowledge they may have of this world or the palaces within it. This little slime just kind of hanging out. Rimuru, is that you? I care about this kingdom. I feel like the people in it take me seriously and actually need my help. When I discovered a town hidden away in a forest after fleeing their own home and then finding the ruins of the village that was attacked by Ganon's forces, I don't know, man, that kind of stood out to me. It was cool. It made all the more sense because these old ruins host the last wise man that teaches you the Thunder spell, the key to defeating the Thunderbird and obtaining the Triforce of Courage. Of course this place would have been attacked harder than the others. And then there's little touches like changing the background of a battle scenario according to where on the map the fight was initiated. It seems so simple and obvious on the surface, but it's a good attention to detail. There's 1.5 things that damage my love for this design, and unfortunately because of the main one, it's probably gone from being seen as a strange or poor design choice to a damning part of the game's structure that has probably kept a lot of people from being able to get into it. It's called Death Mountain, and it's something that you have to clear before you can get to this second palace in the game. The quest to Palace number 2 is so strange because it's one of the longest and most difficult treks you'll experience in the game before taking on one of the main dungeons. It starts off well enough, using your new light source to travel through a cave, find a guy named Bagu who gives you a letter you can use to get a guard to lower a bridge that will lead you to Death Mountain. This place is actually pretty neat at first because this location is actually based on the map of the original game, but the allure wears off pretty quickly as you have to wander through this maze of doors and passageways, trying to find the right way to go when this low life limit is at its absolute worst here. At the end of this gauntlet is the hammer that will allow you to break boulders like I mentioned before, but getting all the way here takes a really long time, a lot of patience, and you can get killed very easily, either by enemy damage, tricky platforming, or just falling victim to knockback. I don't think Death Mountain would have been such a terrible idea on its own, but it's so early on in the game. This is about as alienating to new players as it gets. I mentioned communication in the last Zelda video. It's a crucial part of game design, and the early game in a title needs to communicate to the player what kind of experience they'll have as they continue to play. This right here is poor communication because any average player is going to see how unreasonably hard this game gets seemingly out of nowhere and expect that the game is either going to keep that level of difficulty or continue to escalate. But frankly, Zelda 2 doesn't even get this hard again until endgame stuff is happening, but they do a better job of balancing for it there. But to bring things back to positives, I had a much easier time with this one latest playthrough because the game's design isn't just about experience points and equipment. Skills can go a long way here, and playing the game more made me better at it. Zelda 2 is structured not only around what you gain, but also what you learn. I'll never have as hard of a time with some of these sections because now I know you can jump towards dark nuts and slash them in the head to take them out faster. Aim for the legs on Stalfos, bounce on these guys' heads. I honestly like the fact that Link gets more capable as he obtains experience because that's exactly what happened to me as I played. It's the sort of game-to-player relationship I live for. I found the weaknesses of my enemies and learned how to exploit them. I placed the crystals in all 6 palaces, collected every upgrade and power-up, and I returned to collect as many 1-ups as I could find. It was finally time to venture through the Valley of Death and make my way to the Great Palace. The valley is a cruel mistress, but I was prepared. I was equipped, and even with some of the dumbest deaths I experienced in this whole game, I had extra lives to spare. It wouldn't matter once I reached my goal anyway. Once you get to the Great Palace, you have a bit of a safety net since you don't go to Hyrule Temple if you lose all your lives here. You spawn right back at the start of this palace. By now, the point of the Hyrule Temple respawn has been exhausted. You've probably already explored Hyrule for all it's worth. You've reached the final goal, and the game knows it, but starting at the beginning of this temple should at least make sure you're still on your toes. The final palace might have offered you a small bit of mercy, but don't think you can rest easy. Underestimate this place for one moment and you'll find yourself skewered on the weapon of one of Ganon's loyal lackeys, or melting in a pool of lava. Bring all of the skills you've accumulated with you, because you'll need every last one of them to reach the Thunderbird. He doesn't disappoint either though. You can exploit his weakness to use the Thunder spell, but he's no pushover. Use your shield and jump spells and aim for his head. Be vigilant, be agile, and be careful because he can take you out pretty quick, but with enough perseverance you can pull through. That's not quite the end though. The Elder guarding the Triforce has one final task for you. You've conquered Ganon, his troops, and the countless perils befalling Hyrule, becoming one of the most fearsome forces in the land. Now you need to face the rage and power you've developed. You need to face yourself. This is the greatest enemy that I've faced so far, the most daunting trial that has threatened me, and I'm determined to take it on like I have every other challenge in Zelda 2. By exposing his most simple weakness and cheesing it harder than a dairy farm. Your knee privileges have been revoked. I know, you probably saw this coming from a mile away if you're familiar with this game, but I already feel accomplished, and it's his own dang fault for not guarding his legs, okay? It's hubris, it's poetic. It's a cop-out, but it's the way I'm wrapping up this adventure. Get the Triforce, wake up the princess, and watch the credits roll. And I gotta say, there's something about this simple little thanks a million that really hits home with me. It's such an authentic little note from the devs. I did not grow up playing this. I grew up trying it. I picked it up several times and repeatedly put it back down. I didn't play through it from beginning to end for the first time until getting ready for this review. I sat down in front of an old TV, popped the cartridge into my NES, no save states, no safety nets, I just played, and somehow this became one of my favorite Zelda games. It is flawed, absolutely. The way Death Mountain is handled is atrocious, and there's some stupid things like invisible walls and dungeons that keep this game from being perfect, but I love it. On any given day of the week, I'm probably more likely to replay this than I am the original, and in some ways, I actually think the structure of this game outclasses that one. It's a bold statement, I know, but I'm sticking to it. If I want you to take anything from this review, it's to give this game a shot. Meet it on its own terms. You might just be surprised by what you find. This leads us to the review that I was actually the most curious about when planning this little Zelda marathon. For what reasons? I guess I'll have to share those when we actually tackle it, so I hope you'll join me next time as we take a look at The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Until then, you can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, Sunset City, whichever you prefer, links in the description, and of course, as always, spread the word, tell your friends, and until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. See you next mission. Hey there everyone, just want to say thanks once again for your patience. I really appreciate you guys. You always give me the time that I need to make sure that I'm getting these things done, and I'm not driving myself crazy trying to do them. I'm a little disappointed with my output this year, but at the same time, I have a lot of really exciting things planned for the later portion of this year, and some of them I do kind of have to keep a secret for now, because I'm not entirely sure how they're going to pan out, but man, if it works out, it really is going to be like a small dream come true. You'll probably know more once I get into that. Anyway, Zelda 2, man, it's interesting because the Zelda series has probably the highest amount of games where I did not like a game initially, but looking back on it many years later, there's just something about it that I appreciate more that I just didn't see before. It's something I love about this series. It's always teaching me something new. And who knows, maybe I'll learn something new as I'm taking a look at A Link to the Past, but we won't know that until I review it. So I should probably go ahead and start getting to work on that. But before I go, thank you so much to all of my Patreon supporters, and a very special shout out to my current top tier patrons: Patricia Marcoux, Christine Larkin, Earl Valco, Nicholas Morgan, Jeremiah Harrison, Wonton Photo, and Cirrus the Skeptic. I love you guys, each and every one of you. I really do. Thank you all so much. You make it possible and you make it worth it. With all of that said, thank you so much for watching. I have been Wayne. I need more water from my poor throat, and Zelda 2 good. All right, peace.